Let's see if there's
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily, and I'm with the Miami University Alumni Association. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our virtual wine tasting with Jack Keegan. Before we get started, a quick intro to Jack, although I'm sure most of you already know who he is. Jack is an instructor emeritus who taught the ever-popular viticulture and enology class at Miami. He has worked at Miami for 45 years now and is still teaching a class this semester. So for those of you lucky enough to get into his class, I am sure these tastings bring back fond memories. And for those of you who didn't, this is now your chance. So as a quick reminder, that live viewers can use the Ask a Question box located at the bottom of the screen. I will be monitoring these questions, so please feel free to ask any that you have, and I will relay them to Jack. We do get a lot of questions during these tastings, so if we don't get to your question, I apologize. And with that being said, take it away, Jack.
Thank you, Emily, and good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here. Nice to be back, and I'm excited about talking about some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So that'll be great fun. So let's get started. I guess I should have added that first. This is, in fact, a wine tasting. And, of course, they put it in the holiday edition. So I have to add in parentheses, my holiday, because what I'm going to talk about tonight, other than the wines of the Loire, because I was in the Loire, is we're going to spend a little time also. I was at the 55th anniversary of the Luxembourg program, which, in fact, I taught there from 01, 02, and wouldn't mind going back in the fall. And so... and was really great, in fact, for the wines class and just everything like that. So it was really, really great fun. So that's what I thought we would do. And since I was visiting the Loire, I thought even though they can sort of be maybe a little bit more summery wines, but they would still work very beautifully. And so I thought that's what we would do tonight. So that's what we're doing. So as usual, this, of course, is your list of wines. Again, Domaine, Luneau-Papin, Muscadet, we'll talk more about that, Sèvre-et-Maine. Then the Mary Taylor, which is sort of an interesting name there, the Anjou Blanc. Then the Bernard Fouquet, Vouvray, Cuvée de Silex, it's a kind of soil. And then Thomas Labailly, Sancerre, from a specific area, Chevignon. And then Domaine de Palou. I learned a thing that the French never say their last letters. And so it's not Domaine de Palus, as I used to call it, but Domaine de Palou. This is, in fact, their sort of everyday or, sort of beginning one, the Messange, which, in fact, was the old name for Sauvignon Blanc, or excuse me, Cabernet Franc. And then 2017, Domaine de Palou, Chinon. This is sort of their better one. In fact, one I often use in class. And so, as you know, if you've been here before, you will find that the first wine, in fact, will be the Grange there. This is, in fact, I will open it as usual as we talk. I always tell you how to open a bottle of wine. Many of you have seen this many times. But still, it's always interesting. When I go various places and I go to restaurants or wine bars, I always try to leave the whole capsule there, only the top. I take it off. As in fact, some of you took the class from John Dome. I say this practically every time too. He says without the capsule, the bottle looks naked. And so consequently, I agree. It's there for a reason, so I'm going to leave it. You'll notice, and I want to make sure that the point of the worm, and that's what that's called, I put it right in the center and at an angle, so that then when I turn the bottle and I turn this, it's sitting right there in the middle of the cork, so that I will not hopefully get any cork on there. Someday I'll have to, but we don't usually do old bottles here. I bought a new corkscrew called a Durand, D-U-R-A-N-D, and it really is amazing for old corks because it has the two prongs, which is called a Nassau, and the corkscrew in the middle. And I recently went to a place where I opened a lot of wines that were well more than 20 years old and didn't lose a single cork. So I was very pleased with it. It isn't cheap, in fact, like $140. But it works beautifully, especially with the Performing Arts wine tasting, which, by the way, I guess I'd give it a plug. It might be on March 16th. More about that later. It really comes in handy when I'm opening older bottles. So then, of course, you pull, and that's the first one. And then, of course, you do the second one, and out it comes. Okay, we can go back then. We'll pour the wine, then we'll talk about it. As you saw, The wine is, as you can see, La Grange. That is actually the name of a single vineyard at this winery with this. As usual, beautiful, nice pale straw, as we say. And if you swirl this wine and smell it, Muscadet. We'll talk a little bit more about exactly what it is, but Muscadet is very much near, and I'll show you a picture in a moment, very close to the ocean. And so it goes beautifully with seafood. And this one really, in fact, has a little more oomph to it. Typically, Muscadets, I'll be honest, are typically sort of lemony and a little mineral, and that's about it. Where this has a really, strong, nice aroma, a very flinty, minerally aroma coming out of it. And the fruit, there is some lemon, but there's also almost like a peachiness or pear to it, a little bit rounder aroma. And of course, you taste this wine. And that's the thing. Of course, we're lucky it's not as cold as it has been these last few days in Oxford, but this one is perfectly drinkable. Great as an aperitif. Right away, I think, certainly seafood. If you like oysters, right away. Certainly, I think even has enough for scallops and various other whitefish. But I think, things with goat cheese, I think would be really, really good with. And a lot of other things, because it has that nice bright. But of course, you could do this with chicken without any problem also, especially maybe like a lemon cream sauce would be just delicious. Really very nice. Nice wine. And it has a depth to it. It has sort of I sometimes almost think of it almost like a sort of cereal kind of thing. Not exactly obviously oatmeal or something, but it's got a depth and a roundness to the flavor. And we'll talk a little bit about why. Okay. So let's continue on and we'll talk about this wine. Show you my slides. This is, you can see La Grange. By the way, it says Vieille Vigne on the label, which means, of course, old vines. And typically old vines give you a lower yield and better quality. And you can see, especially if you're looking at it, you can see it here, and of course on a bottle, it's from Muscadet, which is the area that what we call the AOC, Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée. So it'd be Appellation Muscadet Contrôlée. And then you see the Sèvre-et-Maine. That is thought, those are two tributaries of the Loire, because we're doing all these in the Loire, and it is thought to be the best place, in fact, to get Muscadet from. The wine has an interesting history, or actually the area does, simply because in the 1700s, I think around 1720, not that I remember, there was in fact a tremendous cold. I think it might have been the time around the Little Ice Age. And so the vineyards were decimated. And they brought this grape, which in fact, I will show you, of course, here you can see there's Nantes in dark. And then of course you see right north of Nantes, you will see Muscadet. And so this is, of course, is the grape, the Melon de Bourgogne. It's actually, it's interesting, I did not know this for sure. It's a cross between Pinot Blanc, which of course is the white version of Pinot Noir, and then this strange grape called Gouais Blanc. Gouais Blanc and Pinot Noir made many, many crosses of Chardonnay. All kinds of grapes are the offspring of those two plants. Gouais, of course, both of them being very, very ancient vines. And so many of the grapes that, in fact, we enjoy today are, in fact, I guess you could say, children of these two parents, the Pinot Blanc and the Gouais Blanc. So it's sort of interesting, in fact, to see how that works with that in there. So very, very nice. Again, these are some pictures, in fact, from the Domaine of their beautiful sky. This, of course, is their vineyard in wintertime. Look how old those vines are. You can really see that on this picture. Unfortunately, they had the coverage, so I couldn't make them any bigger from that. This, again, is a very nice picture. In fact, they actually have someone playing the guitar on their website. And so I think that you can see that someone's playing the guitar there. But you can see this relatively flat land because you're not that far from the ocean. In this area. And of course, it's also interesting because these two people came together. She came to work for his parents, and they end up, of course, falling in love. And in fact, so now they obviously are working together. In fact, I think she is the winemaker. And there's a lot of pictures on their website of the various things. So I thought that was really neat, in fact, to see. And her parents, in fact, are also in the wine business, not surprisingly, in that area. A couple of things too that I thought you might be interested in. It's biodynamic. So they use absolutely no chemical products. As they say, in fact, this is from their website, they plant a cover crop at the end of summer. They apply only 1 or 2 applications of horn dung. Maybe you've never heard of horn dung. They do that in the spring, and then they use horn silica after bloom and before harvest. These are biodynamic techniques. In fact, the one is called, 500. The other one is 501. I'll show you a thing in a minute about that. The grapes are pressed, again, in a regular pneumatic press, most common, strength and length, depending on what they're doing. They don't use add any yeast, spontaneous fermentation. From the yeast that's on the grape itself. Fermentation, maturation on the lees. So in fact, they give it on that yeast, the dead yeast, for 4 months, which of course help give it that creaminess. In fact, that's what Surlie, Surlie, on the label means. It used to be when they made Muscadet, they almost never did that. But when they wanted to make a special barrel, especially, for example, for like a wedding, they would leave it on the yeast longer. Now, of course, it's the most common practice. Without racking, so they don't really do much with it. They just leave it there for 4 months, I think, which is what gives it that little bit of yeasty, leesy flavor that I'm noticing in that wine during the end of January 2023. So it's really interesting to see what they've done, in fact, with this wine. Yeah, that leasiness. Yeah, that again, now that I think about it, it's like that's what you're smelling in that wine. A little bit of that yeast that's been left over in there. So very, very neat to see. This, of course, is under biodynamics. I thought, I'll show you a picture. They actually take cow horns that are emptied, hollowed out, and they do add the dung to that. And they put it in there. They have to bury it on a certain day. They leave it underground for several months, and then they dig it up and they go through all this stuff. They stir it in the water a certain way, and they spray it a certain way, and only on certain days. This whole thing, it was done by Rudolf Steiner. He's considered the father of biodynamics. Do I completely buy it? Nah. But do I know that a lot of people make really, really good wines and follow this? In my opinion, and again, just because I don't have any good scientific data to back it up, these people care about their vines. They care about their wines. They care about the thing. And so they take excellent care of them. And so if this is what they do, I have to do it, more power to them. This is also, in fact, ones that are filled, in fact, with the dung. And this is the one that they are filling up for the silica, which they talk about spraying also. So that's biodynamics. I thought it'd be something you will very often see. And it's interesting. More and more people talk about sustainability, but I'm not sure when they buy a bottle of wine that they always actually look at those ideas. But there are many, many very good producers who, in fact, do that. Okay. So some things in the world of wine before we get to the next wine. I put this up basically because you can see it's grapes from California. We're lucky. 2023. Unlike most of the rest of the world, in fact, basically the Grape Council, the organization that keeps track of this, has said that this is actually going to be the smallest harvest worldwide since 1961. It's just amazing to think about. But California has had a banner year. As you remember, all that flooding, all that snow, all that water from last year. And then they basically didn't have a spring. It stayed, and sometimes it does this in California, but it stayed cloudy and cool for a very, very long time, really through June. And they never really had heat spikes. In fact, they were worried. A lot of people did not pick their last grapes until mid-November, which is quite late. Let me put it this way. Prior to all the problems we've had with climate change, that would happen fairly often, but it has not happened, in fact, in a number of years. And so this was a very odd year. But the amount of grapes, the amount of wine that was produced is up like 15 to 20%. And a lot of the cabs that they had, especially in some areas, some of the stuff was not taken up by various wineries because they have, when you do a contract, we'll take 100 tons. Well, if they have 120 tons, they can say, well, we're not going to take the other 20 tons. So it ends up being on the bulk wine market. And from what I understand, this means that even those Cabernets under less than $20 should probably, in fact, be very, very good from the 2023 vintage, because there's going to be a lot of juice floating around out there that needs to be used. And so it's going to be interesting, but otherwise it's going to be a great year. So those whites will start coming next spring, and the reds obviously in a year or so. And so we have a lot to look forward to when it comes to California. So that's great fun with that. This is also interesting, La Crema, which is a wine that I think I've used in these these tastings, and I certainly have used it at home and at class. They have started using sheep, and it's interesting. This type of sheep doesn't like grapes. Most animals love grapes. These do not. And so they actually have them out in the vineyard. They have a flock in the vineyard. It's funny, you can actually get a job as a shepherd. And so they have these out in the vineyard. And so they are using them to do the weeds. And again, very biodynamic. Obviously, they add fertilizer to the soil and all of those things. So it's really sort of interesting to see. This was also interesting. In the middle of November, here at a place, because they were all in the trucks to be shipped out, there were 2 semi-tractor trailers filled with Moet de Chandon champagne. And here, the 2 people broke in, took both of the tractor trailers, and drove out with them, carrying about $600,000 worth of champagne in the 2 trucks. The problem is they didn't realize the trucks had tracking devices on them. And so when they got so far, the alarms went off. And so, in fact, of course, they alerted the gendarmerie and they began giving chase. First, they tried to outrun them, then realizing they couldn't do that. In fact, they got stuck in traffic. The one truck, it was going slowly and the police were getting close. All of a sudden, this white BMW comes along and the guy literally, I mean, talk about, what is it, the French Connection? Literally jumps out of the truck into the white Beamer and they speed off. Well, one of the policemen then, he gets close to the truck, he gets out, he jogs along with the truck and gets into the truck to stop it. And the other truck, in fact, went through some barriers, ended up going to a gas station, and then that guy took off. And so they got both things of wine, but they didn't get the bad guys. So I thought that was an interesting story that was going on. And so it's like, wow, $600,000 worth of champagne. So, but they were foiled in that. This was also interesting. This vine was planted right around the time of the American Revolution in the 1770s. And this vine, which is called Ramona, it was in a monastery. It is still extant. Well, here, 3 wineries are picking the grapes from it, and they are making a wine called Angelica. I was an altar boy, and in fact, so many priests used Gold Angelica as their altar wine. It's sweet, etc. So that's what they're making from this vine. They're making Angelica. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story there also. And then finally, this guy, Greek, if I'm not mistaken, he, in fact, is actually holding up, and you can see the 30-second video. I didn't bring it here, but you can find it easily enough. I saw it on the Wine Spectator. 319 glasses that are, in fact, on his head there. And he walked around a while, and he danced around until he was trying to get it back. And as you can see in the third picture, what happened, in fact, to those glasses. 319 glasses, down they came. He moved really fast away from them, too. It was sort of interesting to see in there. So it was sort of fun to see and very, very interesting. So that's some of the things that are going on in the world of wine. Do you have any questions, Emily?
Yes, we do. So a couple actually, all the questions we have are about old vines. So people want to know, when would old vines not be lower yield and higher quality? And then the other question is, how old do vines have to be be considered old? And then how old can vines be and still produce?
Sure. Well, of course, this is an exception. Here you have a vine that is over 200 years old that is still producing. In fact, a huge old vine there in the middle. And it was interesting. The grape, they said it was actually almost a cross between the Criolla or the Mission grape and another one. I didn't quite sort of understand all that, and I didn't have time to look into it more. Vieille vigne, or old vine, or, and you'll see in various countries, has no legal standing. Typically, though, you would consider a vine old usually somewhere between 25 to 35 years old. The problem is, as in fact they mentioned and were sort of alluding to, is that the I thought for sure I shut that off. I swear I put that on off. No, I did. Wonder what happened. Is what happened was the vines do lose their lower and lower yields as time goes on. But in fact, there was another article which I was interested in, didn't read. Let me give you a good example. Australia. In the 60s or 70s, the Australian government wanted people to pull out their old vines. And many people, of course, considered them like their children, and so they would not. And then, of course, they've done a complete 180. And now, in fact, those old vines have almost historic designations. And so if the quality can sometimes be so good that you can have a grape, for example, this past week, I did Spain and Portugal. And one of the wines that we had, the youngest vine was planted in 1960. The oldest vines were from 1890, and they were still using this. And this was not, it was not an inexpensive wine, but it was not, a through the roof wine. And so depending on where you are, especially Spain is a good example. Some of the old vines in Australia are also that way. They keep them, they're intact. And in fact, in many cases with great pride. And some of those wines can be expensive, but as I said, I just served one from, I'm glad I remembered, from 1890 to 1960. Absolutely amazing to think about how old those vines are and how they've been tended. By the way, in fact, I know I show a picture in class of, in fact, grapes in Lodi, again, part of California, not very far from Napa. The vines, I think, were from the 1870s, and they're still producing. And the guy was out there pruning them. So that pretty well talks about old vines and how they are made. Okay.
Yep, that's all for now.
Great. Let's continue on then. Our next wine is the Mary Taylor Anjou Blanc. And again, I will open this one. Should have opened these other ones before. I apologize. I usually just leave one. I find technology sometimes amazing because in fact, I have the ringer off on my phone, so I still can't imagine why it suddenly rang. Oh well, that's the way things go sometimes. Whoa, that had quite the pop. So this is the Mary Taylor Anjou Blanc. And you see the other word, the Pascal Boiteau there. That is actually, well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. Should I lose anything? Oh, I wonder if might be my computer that's doing that, not my phone. I haven't used this for a while and I forgot that it has the ability to do that. Life. Anyway, this is a little funny. It's a little golden, a little more golden. Unfortunately, I don't have the absolute best light for looking, but those of you probably do. It actually does have a much more golden color to it. And still, which is a bit surprising to me, considering it is a 2022. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. The grapes will have something to do with it. And if you swirl and smell this wine, oh, again, pears. Oh, just pears and nice ripe pears. Oh, that's nice. Has a little bit of the herbalness to it also. But yeah, that's what I get out of there so much. Just really nice pear aroma. And I've tasted this wine. Oh, yes. Pears with a little bit of herb to it also. Has really nice depth to it that I really like. It's very, very good. Very good. Yes, has a little bit of that really nice sort of herbal finish. Not quite mint or rosemary, but it really does have a nice finish, which again, this wine has depth to it. I have to laugh that one of the things that Hugh Johnson says in one of the films that I show, this wine has guts. And it really does. There's a white wine that has tremendous amount of quality, a tremendous amount of sort of depth to it. And really, really very, very nice. Really nice. Oh, yeah. Yeah. How could you not drink that most any night of the year? So let's talk about this wine. It is, of course, the Anjou Blanc from Mary Taylor, which is a little surprising. And then, of course, you also see the Pascal Boiteau there. This is the Loire River. The Loire River is the longest river in France. In fact, goes down, almost to the Med. It's amazing. You're not seeing the entire river here. As you can see, it flows there into the Atlantic. And you see Nantes and Muscadet there. And then you see Angers as you go through those areas. And so in that area, and you can see, in fact, in the red, which is the next, we're sort of going up the river is, in fact, how we're working this. We started with Muscadet, which is closest to the ocean. And now we've gone upriver to Anjou and Saumur in those areas. And by the way, well, you'll see pictures. The Loire is just beautiful. And actually the river itself, though, is very shallow. And so there's not boat traffic. I don't think I saw, not that I saw the river that often, but I didn't see a single boat on it at all. Lots of birds, though. In fact, I didn't have time to do any birding, and I was feeling badly because there were some places, even in the town of Amboise, you could see lots of birds. So that was very nice. So is Anjou. So that tells you, in fact, where it is. We're going up the river there. This is, of course, the grape is Chenin Blanc. These are Chenin Blanc grapes, which is, in fact, sort of the grape of the Loire. Obviously, we've already seen Melon de Bourgogne, and now we're seeing this. And of course, they also have Sauvignon Blanc. We won't have one tonight, but they do have those. And there's some other grapes that they do grow, but Chenin basically has pride of place, which is interesting because Chenin is one of those grapes that a lot of people never drink. And that's a shame because, in fact, I'll be honest, as I was getting ready to do this, in fact, just I think sometime today, I thought, oh, I should have done a sparkling Chenin because, in fact, there's some really wonderful sparkling Chenin Blancs. In fact, I'm using one next Tuesday in class. So if you're around. And so the Chenin can make completely dry wines, can make semi-sweet wines, can make sweet wines, can make, truly sweet dessert wines. The other interesting thing about Chenin Blanc is it's a white grape that can age. And so, it's not that 1 to 3 years. If it is a well-made Chenin Blanc, it will be good for 10, 15, 20 years. There's one grape or one area, one producer, in fact, that I really like, Baumard, and he makes a wine called Sévigné's. And that wine doesn't even start to really, really come into its own until it's been aged for 10 years. Sort of amazing to think about. But Chenins can age, and they age very, 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 very well. So it's a really good wine for that. This is Mary Taylor. She's a very interesting background biography. She, in fact, worked in many, many different parts of the wine industry. But one of the things that she felt, and it was that whole idea of place and terroir and people who were passionate about making wine. And it wasn't the Cabernet, Chardonnay, the grapes, of course, that make great wines, but the other ones like Chenin Blanc, like Melon de Bourgogne, like Cabernet Franc, that she was most interested in. And so she started an import company. And so she works with people, literally, in fact, I was shocked when I looked at the map that she had. Oh, she must work with at least 30 different producers. And the thing is the wines are not that expensive. And so you can find some really, really well-made wines that are not run-of-the-mill or the grapes that you see all the time from Mary Taylor. So keep an eye out for her and her wines. So it's very, very interesting, in fact, to see. She works with these people, in fact, here at Domaine de Bussier. And so this beautiful building, and in fact, here is the family working there in front and the vines. And so they work with her and they make their own wines. You can actually stay there also. As I do these things, I find these things out. It would be interesting to do. So very, very neat place, in fact, to visit, and very nice wine, very, very nice wine in there. As you can see, 750 Anjou, the slate sandstone and carboniferous schist, 100% Chenin. Again, Vieille Vigne, average age of the vine are 25 years on average. Sustainable farming, you see this more and more. The HVE3, I should know, but it's in fact one of their things for the quality of their sustainability. Alcohol low, which is nice. And basically it's like, oh yeah, we put in stainless steel, and that's pretty much what we did. And I could not find any more specific information about any of that with going on. What they say, in fact, actually, because I don't know. I don't get the lemon. Honey, I can see the honey where they say honey rose. Juicy white peach, even that would be okay, even though I still get much more out of that. So it's very, very interesting. And of course, there's that lime. I mentioned that sort of on the plate, and slate on the palate, that minerally sits there. Nice wine. Oh, it's nice depth. Very pretty. So the first thing I thought I would mention, especially because obviously Miami University, one of the reasons that I did, actually, I will tell you the truth. I'm teaching this semester, and the guy who was a student coordinator when I was in Luxembourg basically texted me this past summer and said, I signed us up. And so he signed us up for the 50th anniversary. It's like, oh, okay, I'll make it work. And of course, you go to Europe, I'm not going to go for 5 days. And so I told the class well in advance that we would have makeup classes, and so go through everything. And so they were perfectly fine with that. At least they didn't say anything. And so I went to Luxembourg. This, of course, it's a chateau at Differdange that I took going in, and it was a wonderful time. There's, again, another picture, in fact, of that. As I said, I spent a wonderful year there. And it was so important for the wines class and just in so many ways. I was there also. It was good, I think, in some ways for the students, because I was there for 9/11. So the world changed, as you all know, during that period of time. And so between Anna Tamarkin, who was there at the program, we made big dinners for students, etc., because travel was, for a while, was not to be expected in all of that. I had to take this picture. This is an Araucaria. If you ever go down to basically Patagonia, the wilds of Chile and Argentina, the forest down there, these are the main trees. If you've ever seen a Norfolk Island pine, that's also in the same group. And this, of course, was the tree in front of the villa. And I lived my year in the villa, which is the building behind there. It's no longer part of the university. It's actually sort of a school. But I had to go see the tree. And I can still remember it in snow and the whole bit. So it's still there and doing fine. So that's why you're looking at a tree there. And of course, you'll see a picture, but the classrooms are named, in fact, for a number of people. And Ecke Stiller, who for many years was the director, this, in fact, was his classroom. These are two of the students who were there. They actually happen to know students from the wines class. And so I took their picture and sent it, in fact, to a couple of people back here in Oxford for that. We went over, in fact, to Germany, Matt and I, and that, of course, is the Porta Negra, the Black Gate. They're going in fact, to Trier. And the reason, of course, we did that was, in fact, to go see Dr. Stiller and Renata. And so that was really very wonderful, in fact, to see them and have dinner, etc., and to think about all those wonderful times that I spent in Luxembourg there. And I'm not sure how many of you would have known Roland Hoff. He probably, in fact, was the main reason why we have the center in Differdange. He's very well connected within the country. And so he had a lot to do with working with Arbed, in fact, for us to be in Differdange as we've been for the last 25 years. Truly one of the most Renaissance men I have ever met. He is truly one of the reasons why our Luxembourg program is so wonderful, all the wonderful people who are associated with it. Of course, downtown Luxembourg. Matt, in fact, was at Avenue Monterey, and so we spent one wonderful afternoon. Such a human, livable city. Just, cafes were open. People were everywhere walking. It was a beautiful afternoon. So that was very, very nice. There, of course, is the statue to Queen Charlotte there. I had a brunch with friends, and here at this place had a wonderful wine shop, so it was great fun. And of course, then a couple times going back to the chateau there on the side. I also helped with a wine tasting when I was there with Vamoiselle, as you can see, and they make a number of, in fact, absolutely fantastic wines. I mean, I make wines at 10, 12 euros, which of course is about 1-to-1. And the wines were phenomenal. So many really good wines. So that was really great fun. The people from Vamoiselle were very nice, and of course with the alumni that happened to be there. And so these are some of the people that were there. And there's a picture, of course. Maisie Dumont was the person for so many years, and so I had to have a picture of Maisie. And in fact, Paula, who I did not know, but she attended a number of the wine tastings, and so she was there. In fact, she has a picture of her kids with Matt literally 20 some years ago when they visited all the way back then. And of course, this is what the main building looks like there at Vineyards. So I thought it'd be nice to give you a little bit of a taste for the 55th anniversary. It was wonderful to visit and wonderful to see people and to reconnect. And very often, it's like you left the day before. It really ends up being great fun. Okay, so wine number 3, Bernard Fouquet, Vouvray. Same grape in this case. Makes it a little easy because it's a screw cap. By the way, I don't know if anyone's ever made the a survey, but I know the last I had heard, 50% of households do not own corkscrews. And so consequently, screw caps can come in very, very handy with this. Pour this wine. Lighter in color than the Anjou. Still a little golden, but not as golden as the previous wine was. Same grape though. This, of course, is Chenin also. Vouvray, in fact, is, if you have a Vouvray, you're having Chenin Blanc. So if you swirl and smell this wine, some of the closeness, but again, in this case, I am seeing more sort of peachiness and really bright fruit flavor aromas that are there. And almost like a little bit of pear liqueur. There's a little bit of depth to that. So, and I have wine Tourette's, sorry. Suddenly I get this little bit of, I just suddenly got this like thing of almost orange coming out of it. It's amazing what a little bit of air will do to a wine. Oh, so pretty. Taste this wine. Mineral finish. What I like about this wine, what I noticed about this wine first and foremost, was the wonderful mouthfeel. Just silky, just so beautiful. And this wine too, the depth in this wine. I mean, the really quality, because it's not, you're not drinking water or something light. I mean, this wine has real depth to it. Oh, I love that flavor. And again, a little bit of almost that sulfury, but it's that pear, almost like dried pears. So nice. So let's tell you a little bit about this wine. This is Bernard Fouquet. Again, we've gone a little further up the river because, in fact, you see, of course, down there is Muscadet, and then there's Anjou. Now, of course, you see that sort of pink surrounded by red, so it's not the easiest thing to see, but it's there near Touraine and Thiers, is, in fact, Vouvray. I would say probably we see more Vouvray in this country, in other words, as a wine from the Loire, than practically anything else. Maybe Sancerre as being the other one, but we do mainly whites, and in fact, most of the wines that come, in fact, from the Loire are whites, but Vouvray more than anything else, because it's just been around for a very, very long time. The white has an interesting finish, too, and I wouldn't think, let's see, this is Cuvée Silex, 13% alcohol, so certainly not much at all to that wine. And so this is, in fact, where it's from. Again, pictures, in fact, from their place. Bernard Fouquet was sort of one of the sort of great masters of Chenin Blanc, of these wines. Again, beautiful picture of the grapes going, in fact, probably in October, November there. And in fact, this is he. He, in fact, was truly one of the people, as we'll talk about Domaine Huet in a bit, and a few other people. There are some great, great producers in Vouvray, and he is certainly one of them. Champelou is another one I can think of, Huet being another one there too. Interesting though, just in the last year or so, he has in fact turned the reins over to his young associate. You can see him in fact in the, I like this picture because look at the ceiling and look around you. You are in fact, this tufa rock. You're in this chalky rock. And in fact, if you go to the Loire, what you will still find are wineries and buildings and people who basically are living in caves. They, of course, are beautifully set caves, but they are in fact, in the ground. In there. In fact, actually, the place I stayed last, in fact, was very much like that. A lot of stone that was in a lot of the buildings. So it's really interesting. In fact, troglodyte, we use that word. They, in fact, you will see troglodyte things in many, many parts of the Loire. And so, but again, and it's that stone, it's that rock that makes a difference. Though in these areas, actually here, it's a more of a marl. The silex is a little bit different in there. It's the same, it's in several different places. Here, of course, look at it. You're in a cave. You are literally in a cave when you see this. And this, of course, is their cellar there at Bernard Fouquet there. This is also interesting. Again, young people and trying different things, etc. The grapes, in fact, the wines have, in fact, they're now fermenting them in these almost amphora-like containers. And so the wine, and again, makes different flavor then. It's obviously not stainless. And so the things they did. So these, in fact, are what they are now doing this. Lots of this kind of experimentation that's going on in the world of wine in there. Here, of course, are their vineyards. And another picture of their vineyards there. So very, very neat, in fact, to see. Production details. This is a dry vouvray, 2 flint soil. That's what silex is. Parcels entirely hand harvested. So again, they don't use anything, especially because it is in fact so steep. Only indigenous yeast. They also do not add yeast to it. Matured and famous in stainless steel thermo-regulated vats, which we're seeing. 100% Chenin Blanc. Again, look at that, 50 to 60-year-old vines. Do you have your laptop with you? You can always do that this way too. Okay, organic practicing. And again, look at that. Bouquet of pears, green apples, quince, and melon. Develops notes of mineral and honey. Expressive and exceptionally well balanced on the palate with lots of lemon and a trace of anise. Maybe. I don't really sort of get the anise, but and I certainly do still get the green apple, etc. on there. Interesting wine. Nice. And it does have, I like this, notes of mineral and honey. The thing is, in fact, it's really great. When I do aroma exercise in class, I use honey practically every time. And the problem is we always associate honey with sweetness. When if you just smell honey, it isn't that sweet. And so it's sort of interesting that in fact, I think this does have some of the aroma of honey, but it doesn't have the sweetness. And dry, yeah, I would say it maybe has a little bit of sugar, but not very much. Okay, a little bit about that. One of the things that I did when I was over there was I ended up only spending about a day in Epernay. In fact, I really didn't get any of the houses. But one of the things that I saw was happening in Champagne was a trade fair. And it was a trade fair for people in Champagne. In other words, people who grow the grapes, people who make the wine, all of those things, not for consumers or educators or anyone else like that. But it was really still very fascinating. And I thought I would just show you a few things, in fact, that are going on. It was neat because I saw some of the latest in the presses and that kind of stuff. This, of course, just shows you, when you have a champagne, they have the tops on them and the various kinds of tops. And so this was a person, in fact, showing the what's called the facomusels there at the top that sort of hold that prevent the wire from going down through the cork there on the top. And some of them can be just absolutely beautiful in there. In fact, I have way too many of them in this house with that. This is interesting too. Remember I showed you the one he does? These, in fact, using various kinds of eggs and various things along that line are very widely used. And so this is, in fact, is some of the things that are being sold and are used, in fact, for fermentation of the grapes. Look at this, glass. Just sort of really amazing to see. This is not, this is not your grandfather's cellar in many ways. There's no question about seeing some of these things. And again, you see many, many people use eggs like that. So these are actually fermenters. This is what they would ferment the grapes in to make the wine in all of that. And trucks, tractors, I'm sure many of them going well over 6 figures. And again, they're using them to dig up the soil, to hoe the soil, various things like this. And so it was really fascinating. This is a wind machine. And of course, you can see a portable one because to prevent frost, cold air sinks. And so if you're at the bottom of the hill or something like this, the air is going to sink there, and then you're going to have frost. By using a fan, you mix up the air and it warms the air. And so this is in fact widely used in many places. And so these, in fact, they have several different kinds on display at this trade fair. And this crazy thing, I mean, they now have robots that do practically everything. And, they have things in there. So someone isn't around. There's no one there. And in fact, I didn't put it in here, but I have which I might show in class this week, basically going up and down the rows and doing various tasks that in fact a person would do, and there's no one doing that. It's hoeing things up, or it's spraying, or things like that. So really very interesting from that standpoint. This also, and I've heard about this, to prevent some diseases, they go through the vines and they actually hit them with UV light. And so what you are seeing are, in fact, UV transmitters that will go on either side of the vine, and of course, bombarding that. And of course, UV is used that way and killing, many of the fungal diseases that may be on there. And so this is something that people are experimenting with, the use of light, in fact, to kill certain fungal diseases that are there. And so this was one of the things that was on display there. And of course, this is a picture. I was at Verzenay just for a very short period of time. And you can see these beautiful vineyards. And I hope you can see on your screen all how much cut up. I will bet you that there are probably at least 20 or 25 different owners of those vineyards. So each one has a small plot, and then they sell it to the champagne houses in many cases, or they have a large long-term contract with them, because many of the champagne houses do not own all their grapes. In fact, almost all of them do not. Varies percentages, some very small, 10 or 20%. Others, of course, a much higher percentage. But there are a lot of, in fact, independent producers or other grape growers in Champagne. And so, in fact, that's what you'll see. So I thought that was a quick sort of side note to what we were doing in all of that. Okay. Also, while I was there, we then, in fact, made a quick jump over to England. There, in fact, are the White Cliffs of Dover. And of course, I add this also because of the Miami connections. You may have known Ed or Annette Tamarkin. Ed taught English for many, many years at the university, and Annette ran the Luxembourg program. And in fact, they were in Luxembourg when I was there, and we were friends before, but became great friends there. And so we're there. Matt, in fact, the other gentleman, is the person I traveled with. And then the woman, in fact, actually is a friend of theirs who has written a lot of, I have to find out, in fact, her name and try to read some of her books, has written a lot of mysteries. And so it was very nice. We had a wonderful, wonderful luncheon, and it was really just great to pop over and see them. And the great thing too, we put the car on a ship, and then went upstairs, and either was out in the wind or sitting upstairs, and it was just wonderful. I really could not tell you how much fun it was, in fact, to go over to England, to cross the channel in a boat and then come back. So that was really great fun. In fact, this was, in fact, on the way back, this was, in fact, the boat, part of the boat, that a very, very large ship to cross the channel. You could hardly tell the fact you're on a boat. And there, of course, is the English Channel there out our window up at the top. So it's really very, very, very neat and fun to do. Must have missed something there. Okay, any questions, Emily?
So we don't, oh yeah, actually one did come in just as I said that. So we have a comment. Someone said, Mr. Hoferlin was my 5th grade teacher when I attended the American School of Lux in the 1970s. What a wonderful man. So that was from a while ago. Susan Vincent. But I thought that was a cool comment. And sorry, I'm looking at my other screen. I didn't put them in over here. So someone wants to know, does the use of UV light affect the organic classification?
That's a good question. And I would think not, simply because you are not using any harsh chemicals. Obviously, UV light is, of course, part of sunlight. And so you're simply just adding more to it. And in fact, that's actually, one of the major or very important aspects of growing grapes is, in fact, having an open canopy. So you do have good light inception that helps and dries off the leaves and, in fact, allows it. So I I don't make the rules, so I can't think, but I would think from a logical standpoint that it would still allow you to be organic. In fact, they would love it because, in fact, you're not using harsh chemical. You're not doing those things. And so I would think from logical that they would, in fact, welcome something like that. I could be wrong, but at least trying to think of it logically, that's what I would think. Anything else?
That's all for now. We have other questions, but I'll save them for the end.
I'm just opening the next wine. As you saw, this is Sancerre. And Sancerre, again, is a wonderful place to visit. And this is actually a Sancerre Rosé. So the problem is, in fact, again, with it being December, luckily, again, the weather's not bad. I know our thoughts, and not always rightly, our thoughts go a lot more to reds when it gets cold, etc. But again, if you're in a perfectly good house or it's a nice day or a nice afternoon, a glass of rosé or white, no problem at all, especially wines of this quality. So this is the Sancerre, authentique. Nice color, very, very light. The French might call that œil de perdu, which is like the pheasant's eye. They use that, in fact, sometimes in champagnes. Has that really light color, in fact, very much like the really light rosés that you would get in the south of France, like at Tavel there. So if you swirl and smell this wine, beautiful color. Oh, isn't that nice? Fresh, minerally, maybe a little bit of cherries. And if you taste this wine, so nice. And it's sort of funny. Oh yes, cherries. Maybe a little raspberry. Not much earthiness. Really is very bright, really great fruit. I still think about it though. For some reason in Pinots, they are very, very fruit friendly, and there's all kinds of things you could have with this. But right away, I think, even with a regular Pinot, but even certainly with this Pinot Rosé, it would be wonderful with salmon. Just good, and actually, even smoked salmon. Oh, it would be really tasty. Do you think I think of food too much? But it is. It's like right away, it's like, oh, what can I go? Because wine's food, and certainly I like having a glass myself, but it's like right away, it's like, oh, what can I make with this? Very, very nice. So let's continue on. I'll tell you a little bit about this wine. As you can see, it's Sancerre Authentique from Thomas Labelle. We have now gone much farther up the river. As you can see, we go to Muscadet, and then, of course, there's Bourgogne. We'll get that back to them. There's Vouvray. You have to go all the way over almost to the very far edge of the screen, and it's sort of in yellow where Sancerre and Puy are. This is Puy Fumé as opposed to Puy Fuissé. This is Sancerre. Sancerre is mainly known for its Sauvignon Blanc, but they do grow. If you get a red Sancerre, it is Pinot Noir, and this is. And in fact, if the map were a little smaller, or if you showed all of France, you would see two things. One, you're not that far from Paris by this time. And two, you're really not that far from Burgundy. And so it's not surprising that you do have Pinot Noir being grown there, since a red Burgundy is, in fact, Pinot Noir in that area. So it's sort of very, very nice for that. Sort of interesting. This is, in fact, is the winery. It doesn't look like your certainly normal winery that you would see in there, but they did, in fact, a tremendous amount of work with it when they took it over. There, in fact, are their vines on very, very steep hillsides. I mean, look at this. In fact, this area is considered one of the true sweet spots of Sancerre. And so very, very nice under that. You can see, in fact, sort of coming up there with the vines or with the grapes up there at the top. 100% Pinot Noir on the Mont d'Alme vineyard, one of Sancerre's greatest. Clay limestone soil, 25-year-old vines, unfiltered, unfined. So they've done nothing, in fact, with this wine. They basically have taken it off the lees. They haven't sent it through a filtration. They've not fined it at all, etc. Rosé is direct press wine fermented on native yeast in fiberglass and cement tanks, aged in stainless steel tanks, again, for not long, 4 to 6 months. Like everything else that we've had, it sees no oak at all. It also, interesting enough, most whites don't go through malolactic fermentation, where you change the malic acid into lactic acid. And that's why this wine has a very nice, fresh acidity, but certainly not too much in all of that. So very, very nice wine. Very, very nice wine. So, as it says, this is in fact some things lovely pink color, pretty aromas of red raspberry, tart strawberry, citrus and melon. Palate is very crisp, which it is, and fresh with candied red fruits, citrus and stony acids, continuing in the juicy and very mineral finish. This is one of the raciest rosés you can find. Very elegant and refreshing. I could not agree more. Just a lovely wine. Now, as many of you know, I ran the greenhouses, and plants are, in fact, another one of my passions, or plants in general, not just specifically grapes. And so if you ever get a chance, you need to go to Villandry, as you will see right now. Really fascinating place. Oh, I put this in, has a really very, very interesting history. The original building was built in fact, the original keep is from the sort of the Middle Ages, like 1200. And then, of course, people owned it, and they kept, in fact, sort of making it larger and larger and larger. And the one person put in that wonderful beds of flowers, etc. But again, it's like, oh, this owner wants to do that, or this owner has lots of money, and then he lost all of his money. And so all of those things happened in all of those things. The name, in fact, goes all the way back to 1639, and the keep, which you'll see what the castle was as it was in there. In the 1700s, the interior was, so it wasn't so cold and drafty, was in fact refurbished. And in fact, interesting, one of the owners, in fact, made his fortune, a huge fortune, in coffee plantations. But when there was, in fact, the revolution in Santo Domingo, he lost all of his money, and then, in fact, had to sell this, in fact, at a loss. For a short period of time, Napoleon's brother, Jerome Bonaparte, was there. In fact, he wanted, land, or he wanted to move to Italy, again, because obviously, Napoleon fell. And so there was a whole complete mess about all of that. Going through that. It almost, in fact, fell to ruin, almost became a quarry, was at one point almost a factory. And so I just want to sort of get you an idea about what happened in all of this. Luckily, there was a gentleman, chemist, who obviously had made a lot of money, worked, in fact, with a person who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1913. He and his wife, who just happened to be a big heiress from the U.S., Anne Coleman. In fact, she was the heiress to a very large coal and steel fortune. I didn't bother looking, but prior to this, they in fact turned this place into a park, an English park, as you are seeing this right as it is. So this is what it looks like today. This is Villandry. You can see on the right-hand side the keep, which basically was the castle. It was, in fact, a fortress, first of all. Then the rest of that, in fact, had been added to a lot over the centuries. And when this gentleman and his wife came in the beginning of the 20th century, they got rid of all of the sort of outside things and the messiness. They really brought it back to what it probably looked like in the 1600s. And it is absolutely stunningly beautiful. And what his idea was that he was going to make it, or make the gardens almost back to as they were during the Renaissance. And so this is basically his idea of a monastery garden. The other thing I want you to notice is, as we go through all of this, especially in this area, is all of the things that are filled up in the middle are vegetables. Those are leeks right there. And so the entire thing is filled, it's just amazing to see, is nothing but vegetables. This is kale, as you can see. In fact, I wrote them afterwards and asked what they did with it, because someone asked me. And there I think the people who work there take it home and they give it to some of the people, I guess, who go there. But I have no idea what they do with all of these vegetables. Then later on, I think it was in the 60s, they put in this long herb garden. And so this is the herb garden up at the top of the hill. Again, look at this place. It is just So beautiful. And then, of course, they up at the top of the hill, they now have the sun garden where, in fact, it's sort of very sort of wild and sort of much more natural there. And so these are some of the things that are there. But look at these beds. It is just absolutely gorgeous. Then, of course, a long alley there at the top of the hill. But look at this. This is, you can go up, and of course they have wonderful places because you go up higher. So you can see, and you can see, of course, the just amazing knot gardens. I've been here twice before, but it was always in the spring. So I was never able, in fact, to see these filled with flowers as I am, because here in the front, those are in fact flowers, mainly begonias. And in the back, it's all vegetables. Look at that. Just absolutely. Here's, of course, was sort of a panoramic view. I tried to get it all in, but look at that. It is just absolutely beautiful. The interior, you can also go and visit, get gorgeous flowers. We'll talk more about that when we get to Chenonceau. But just look at this knot garden, and every one of them, as you can see, every one has a different pattern. And you see hearts, and in fact, part of it is playing cards, and just all kinds of things like that. And why isn't this moving? We're at a pause here. And I don't know why.
You know what? It is showing that you're at slide 100, and I'm wondering.
I was worried about that.
If there's a max on slides. If you remove, so yeah, if you just, I'll remove this, and then if you share your screen, we'll be able to see the rest of your slides.
I'm not sure.
So go to present, and then share screen at the bottom, and make sure your slides are pulled up, and then we'll be able to see your slides.
My slides are pulled up, in other words, from the other thing?
Yep. No, have them pulled up on your desktop.
Go ahead. This is why I have help. I'd be sitting going,
sorry about that, Jack. I know we got on early to test this, and then I didn't think of there being a max slides.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so share screen, and then once you have your slides up, you'll be able to share your screen.
Sure.
In the meantime.
Yes. Oh, questions, yes.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. There it is. And then if you just get to where you were before. I know, we got to click through. While you're doing that, someone asked, how are California rosé wines different from French rosé?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Actually, let's do a simpler question.
Yes.
It's not really Archer and Lauren, who are watching from Scotland. They want to know they want to know how tall your tree is. They say it looks very festive.
Actually, in fact, yes. In fact, maybe we can actually do that afterwards. So people who've been there. People know about my tree. It's probably a little more than 10 foot tall. And unfortunately, and in fact, and now see, I'm going to have to tell the truth.
You're going to have to out yourself, which is kind of why I asked that question.
What happened is, because again, I've been so busy, and so I haven't had time to do the tree. But for those of you who did the tasting with me in the summertime, this is actually a tree that I have. They're 7 foot trees. I don't know if you see me moving that. Can you see that, Emily? I don't even know where we are now.
Yeah, I can see it.
Share. What I have to do? No, I'm sharing.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Okay, and so can you see me?
Yep, we can see you too. I have you on full screen.
And you see, I'm pulling the tree around me because again, I thought, I need some color and something festive. So this will be in fact covered with over 2,000 lights. And I have crystals that, in fact, I have collected and my sisters have given me, etc. And so it'll be crystals and gold, and it will be absolutely gorgeous. I'll have to send you a picture.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So let's finish Villon 3, and then we'll continue on. And I can use my advancer now. Look at this. I mean, and those are lettuces. I mean, you just look at all of this, and it's just absolutely. And of course, I like how they obviously had some things they had to pull, so they put pumpkins in the background. You can see all the pumpkins sitting there on the soil that's there. This is actually, I got to the roof, and so this is where you come out on the roof in there. And also, this was actually an art installation, and so you could see various things. But what was great was you could see how the place was built. And I'm sure all the way back, I'm sure it's been refurbished in some ways, but you can see this ancient architecture and these huge pieces of wood holding it all together. just sort of amazing, in fact, to see. And then, of course, as I said, the person, whoever did this courtyard, must have been really dizzy after all that. It's like, whoa, I mean, that really is sort of just crazy. So it really is amazing. This is, in fact, looking down from the roof at Villandry. It was just absolutely an amazing place to visit. Any other questions before we start with the next wine, Emily?
Goodness, sorry, now I'm all a little. Oh, okay, here we go.
Okay, so am I.
Here's what I started to ask before. How are California rosé wines different from French rosé?
Actually, for the most part, I think everyone does it pretty much the same way. There are three main ways to make rosé. One is simply don't allow a lot of skin contact, or you may have a very light colored grape. And so you may only allow the skins, because remember, all of the color in almost all grapes are in the skins only. And so if you press it immediately and don't press too hard, the juice will be white. And so it works out and so that is, in fact, so if you leave it on for 4 hours or 6 hours, depending on how much color and flavor you want to pull out of those skins, then that will, in fact, determine the color of the rosé that you're making. So that's probably the most common method. Second is what the French would call saignée, which mainly means bleeding. So, and especially if you want to make, and some wines, where is this? Someplace in Italy. And I have to think, I've been to too many wine tastings sometimes, that in fact, these people, this is how they make their rosés almost completely. But what you do is, and especially sometimes if you have a wine and the flavors aren't, it's not very, you don't have a lot of concentration. And so you want to concentrate it. What you'll do is you will let it on the skins for a few hours, and then you will take off some of that juice, and then finish it off like you would a white wine. And so that sort of concentrates what's left. And so that method is called saignée. The third method, now let me see if I make sure I say all this right. In most European countries, certainly in Italy, certainly in Spain, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it is in France. That is how you do it. But there are, in fact, wines that are made by either co-fermenting reds and whites together, or adding red wine to the wine after, taking a white wine, adding a little red wine to it. In Italy, one of my favorites is called Charetto, and that's how they make it. And so that's the third way of making rosés. So it's either not much skin contact with the original, or bleeding, or adding it to. But then usually you can't call it, they won't let you use the same word. They won't let you, for example, call it a rosato. You have to call it like Charetto or something else to distinguish it between the two. It used to be, in fact, you weren't allowed to do that at all, but they changed the laws, I think, in the 90s. Okay?
That's all for now.
Great. Now, what I thought I would do for the last, because again, there are not a lot of reds in the Loire, and most of them, in fact, there's three areas for the most part. There's Bourgogne, there is Chinon, and then there is St. Nicholas de Bourgogne. And so one of the wines, in fact, one of the places I visited, so you'll see some pictures, that I visited, in fact, was Domaine de Palou. And so I thought it would be interesting to taste two wines from the same place. One, they're sort of entry-level wine that's, in fact, young, meant to be drunk relatively young. And the other one having a bit more concentration and from better grapes, etc. To see, okay, here's the same producer. Let's look at two different wines. So the wine that we're having right now is the Messange Rouge from Chinon, from Domaine de Palou. Beautiful color. It's 2022, and so you see, has those garnet highlights, has that really beautiful red to it. Very beautiful. Just gorgeous color. Not that dark. And of course, if you swirl and smell this wine, Cabernet Franc, no question. I laughed. One of my friends who's a winemaker, he always got a little ticked at me Because, of course, the first thing I notice is the green pepper. It has a peppery nose. It really does. It has a little green pepper, but it's not like hit you over the head. And of course, it's softened, it's rounded. There's other fruit flavors there. But certainly for me, one of the signatures, almost always for Cab Franc, is that little bit of green pepper that's in that wine. But oh, gee, there's other, in fact, wonderful red fruits there. It just has a wonderful depth to it. And of course, you taste this wine. Bright, fresh, clean, not much tannin. There is tannin there, obviously, because we're dealing with a red wine. Wow. Boy, that's nice. And the only thing I can think of, again, so with food, it's like, wow, what would this go with? You could do this with barbecue. You could do this with with braises. You could do this with good hamburgers. I'm not sure about, well, depending on what you put in your pizza. Could be, if it was a good pizza, you could certainly do it. I mean, really, what a wonderful food wine. And really, because and the thing is you could drink this, in fact, with appetizers, because it's not too heavy. It's really refreshing. It's got good acidity. Yeah, a little soapy comes in the finish too, but no problem. That's a lovely wine. So, some about this wine. By the way, a Messange is one of the old names. That's one of the things you find, and especially I have a book over on my shelf called, in fact, I think it's called Wine Grapes. And in it, you will very often find that many of these grapes may have 40, 50, 60, 70 or more synonyms. And so they've been called various places, which is why, by the way, here in most of the rest of the world, we call that red grape Syrah. What do they call it in Australia? Shiraz. And that's because when it went to Australia, that was the name that was with it. And so that's what stuck. And you find that a lot. And it gets confusing at times because Cot, I'm trying to think, in fact, which grape is Cot, is another wine, that's a word they use. There, actually, I think it's for Vermentino. And in fact, and people get upset then because, in fact, because Vermentino sounds a lot better than Cot. And so a lot of French producers are using the word Vermentino, and they're really, according to law, not supposed to, but they're basically ignoring it. And so that's what goes on when it comes to names in all of that. But that's, in fact, where that wine came from. Here we are again on the Loire. In this case, if you go, you will see, we pass Anjou, and then you see in pink Bourgogne, and right south of there is Chinon. Chinon, by the way, in fact, I have a picture, very, very famous place, because during the 100 Years' War, to be crowned king of France, you have to go to Reims, which of course is basically the capital of Champagne, because it was the spiritual center of France because of Saint-Remy, who basically converted much of the French to Christianity. And of course, during the 100 Years' War, the English controlled Reims. And so the Dauphin, of course, is like the Prince of Wales in England, could not be crowned king. And this, of course, is where Joan of Arc comes. He was in Chinon. She came, basically said, hey, buddy, you're coming with me, in French, of course. And then, and so she led the armies victoriously. So, of course, he could be crowned. But of course, then they sold her to the English, and the English burned her at the stake. So that's just what happens. A cautionary tale, I guess, in there. But very, very interesting and beautiful place. And so you can still see, part of the castle, in fact, is still there on the top of the hill. I have at least one picture of that in there. Again, this is the grape Cabernet Franc. Beautiful picture of it there. This is, in fact, is part of the keep, what is left of the Chinon, the castle at Chinon. So very, very interesting to visit there. I visited, in fact, when I was there, because I've used the wine very often, I stopped at Domaine de Palu. This, in fact, very unprepossessing building. In fact, I have to tell you, in class, in fact, I was laughing because I was just looking at my lecture from this. In class, I have these pictures of these two beautiful buildings. And so I went there and I'm like, well, where's the buildings? And one of them, in fact, is right along the water. And of course, the Loire is there. It's like, well, there's no water here. And I'm thinking, am I crazy? So, of course, when I came back and I happened to look, in fact, and so then I wrote Domaine de Palu and said, I really enjoyed my stay. But like, there are these pictures. I think I said, what are they? So sure enough, in fact, one of the companies here in the States, they had put pictures that had nothing to do with their place. In fact, it's really a fairly unprepossessing place there. But of course, very, very nice and wonderful wines. These are, in fact, some of the vineyards in Chinon there. This is, in fact, I went to the top of this one hill and took this panoramic view of the area in there. And in fact, Domaine de Palu has some of the best vineyards, in fact, in all of Chinon. These are some of the old vines that are there because I had written, when I do these things, I make appointments. And so I wrote them once. I wrote them twice. And in fact, I think I told them I was going to be coming to visit on that day, but I never got an answer back. So my friend Matt and I, we go there and we get out of the car, and this guy comes sort of walking over, and we explained what was going on. And he looked at us blankly for like 5 seconds and goes, oh, I remember. And so he obviously, someone had told him about the email. And so here he is. I mean, the winemaker, the owner, the everything, in fact, gave us then the complete tour. Look at these old vines, just absolutely amazing, in fact, to see. But he took over this place. In fact, when he was 30, it says, Messanges is the old Loire name for Cabernet Franc. Domaine de Palu reveals its charm and seductive character of Cabernet Franc, floral and spicy character. Pure expression of Cab Franc. The grapes are used for this cuvee are macerated for only 5 days. So that's relatively short. Some very often grapes, especially Cabernet, not surprising if it would be, by the way, macerating means keep it all together as the must for like a month. 5 days, and then it's aged in concrete tanks and stainless steel for 6 months, so no oak. It's soft, as it says, abundant, bright red cherry, mild spice, herbal and stony qualities, dangerously easy to drink. That's true. Roast chicken, this would be wonderful as roast chicken. Nicely served, slightly chilled is in fact what they say from this wine in there. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment, but I thought too, another place I visited, and I thought I would show you very quickly, is Domaine Huet. And Emily, I mean, obviously we didn't talk about this, but I'm curious, and I don't know if we should do a survey. And again, with everyone listening, I think it's fine because there are wines that I could have used. Domaine de Beaumard, Savignés, the wine from Domaine Huet. But some of these wines can be $30, $40, $50. And so I'm not sure, with the people, because you don't have to buy them all. If I should do something, maybe at a higher price point, because it is sort of, we don't do this that often on a special occasion. But I always hesitate. I try to get wines that, in fact, are of good value so that a lot of people can do it. But if people are like, oh, Jack, this is something that I'd be interested to know. So somehow we're going to put a survey out and get some feedback. So I would like to know because it gives me a better idea. One example is Domaine Huet. Domaine Huet, in fact, is probably the best producer of Vouvray in the Loire, obviously in Vouvray. And this is, in fact, at their door. You can see not a very prepossessing place. This, in fact, I took a quick peek in there and took that picture. This is, in fact, the person who worked with us. Johan was there when we were tasting the wines, and he took us back, in fact, to look at the sparkling wines. And again, look at the cave. But it was great. I walk in, you'll love this. And of course, what is he wearing? He's wearing a San Francisco 49ers sweatshirt. And in fact, he obviously was very, very, very passionate about football, American football. And so, in fact, on this, there it is, in fact, on a sparkling wine bottle. Can't call it champagne. I'm not in champagne. Sparkling wine. In fact, these are pupitres. Here's a wonderful thing. He's, as I told him, he's the first remeur that I've ever met, because a remeur does remouage, where you turn the bottles to get the yeast, in fact, down there. So, in fact, I have, in fact, not very good videos of him doing that. So that's what he is doing. And look at this. This goes, in fact, for a kilometer down through there, these tufa, these amazing caves down through there. You're probably about 40 foot underground in this cave that, in fact, we went through. What he did show us, though, in fact, you can see the yeast on the bottom of that bottle, and that's, in fact, what he will be eventually moving down to the neck of the bottle to be frozen and gotten rid of. So you don't have, in fact, a cloudy wine. But look, He gave it a quick shake. And so you see how cloudy, and it will be weeks before that goes down. But this wine, in fact, will not be done in a while. So it was not a problem for that bottle. But look at this. This is, in fact, you can see in the caves, their wine that is, in fact, in storage. And it was wonderful. He tells us stories. Here, this very large opening, they used it as, it really wouldn't be a speakeasy because they're allowed to drink wine, but to hide from the Germans. They actually, in fact, he shows on one side where the clarinetist and the various musicians would stand. And so they would, in fact, have parties, again, hidden from the Germans, down in this cave, down below. And the other thing that was amazing, this was amazing. As I told you, I'm like 40 feet underground. And what is on those walls? Roots. Those roots, in fact, going down through like 20 feet of soil, and then like 20 feet of this tufa, this calcium rock, this chalky rock down there. And so, in fact, there are roots on the walls in this cave. It's just amazing to see. Really very neat. This, of course, is their sweet wine from 1997. Here, of course, is 1986. Again, the sweet wines, which in fact will last indefinitely, practically. And so it was just an amazing place to visit. It would be nice to see this. By the way, too, there's another thing, too. Did you know you can actually get pizza from a vending machine? Obviously, they must heat it up all in there, etc. So it's just amazing to see. There it was sitting at a gas station. Thought, oh, yeah, we didn't have one. That was okay. But that, in fact, is what we did for all of that. So that was pretty interesting and neat to see. Okay. Any questions, Emily?
Yeah, one we have, which white grape varietals are most commonly used to produce sparkling wine? Can any white grape be a quality sparkling wine, or do certain grapes do better?
Good question. Actually, let me answer it this way. And actually, I would have to say, you can make sparkling wine out of anything. I mean, for example, in Australia, they make sparkling Shiraz. And so it's a red sparkling wine. And I've had one or two that are pretty good, but I'm really not a fan. The most important thing about sparkling wines is good acidity. And actually, surprising enough, not so ripe for a couple of reasons. So I will say in Champagne, they use 3 grape varieties. They use Pinot Noir, they use Chardonnay, and they use Pinot Meunier, or as they just call it, Meunier now, which is in fact a clone, a variant on Pinot Noir. And they feel that the mixture of those, but there really are, if you want to be geeky about it, there are really 3 different grapes at least that are allowed and used to be planted much more widely in Champagne pre-phylloxera, when that bug that came from the United States hit the area. And so those are considered to be, the sine qua non, shall we say, the tops of the line. But I have had, obviously, in the Loire, they make sparkling wine, and some very good ones out of Chenin Blanc. In Alsace, they may use Pinot Gris, which of course is a different variant of Pinot Noir, and probably some Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. In Spain, when you have cava, typically you have, in fact, some of the indigenous grapes, Macabeo, Parellada, Zarolo, are in fact 3 of the most common indigenous grapes that are used in Spain in the production of Spanish wines. I've had sparkling Rieslings, of course, from Germany. And so as long as I think the criteria for me, and which is why, by the way, most grapes that are made into sparkling wine are picked when they are not completely ripe. You don't want a grape that then you will make into wine that will be like 12% alcohol. Because when you do the second fermentation, that will add 2 to 2.5% of alcohol to it. So all of a sudden you've got a wine that's not only sparkling, but 14%. And typically that alcohol, the bubbles, sort of magnify the flavors. And so the alcohol would be too strong, which is why practically every sparkling wine you'll ever find will be 12 or 12.5% alcohol, never any more than that. And so that's what, in fact, how they are made. But I've had, yes, lots of good, In Bordeaux, of course, they have to use Bordeaux grape varieties. And so they'll use, I've had wines, again, light or white wines, or maybe just a little bit colored, like a rosé, made from Cab Franc. Obviously, they do have Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, but I'm not sure how much they use of that in those areas. So that's a good question. But there's a lot of grapes that can go. I think the important thing is high acidity, and not very ripe, so that you do end up with a wine of about that percentage. And you really don't want something, because the bubbles magnify the aromas, you don't want something that has a tremendous amount of flavor or about aromas to it. By the way, and of course, Moscato, of course, is what makes Asti Spumante, and that's fine, etc. And then I use a sparkling. It's actually only has a little bit of sparkling. I use a Moscato d'Asti that is not sparkling in class, and boy, it's just beautiful. And that, of course, is sweet. So yeah, lots of wines can make sparkling wine, and I'm sure I missed a few, even in that just quick sort of overview. But that's a good question.
And that's all for now.
Sure. Let's continue then. This, of course, is made from the same producer, and that's why I thought it'd be good to do them close. And of course, we have two glasses. You can compare them between the two. This is Les Pensées de Palu, Cabernet Franc. It says from Chinon, same place, from Domaine de Palu. First of all, you'll notice the color's darker. In fact, it is not horribly dark. In fact, look at that. That wine is 2017, and it still has beautiful red color. I see no bricking. I see no thing. I would be impossible to tell that this wine wasn't from 20 or 21, much less 17, which in fact it is. That's a beautiful color on that wine. And in this case, if you swirl and smell this wine, by the way, same grape, Cabernet Franc. But again, nothing wrong with that Domaine de Palu. That's a perfectly good wine, really tasty, really nice, really nice, sort of racy, etc. But the depth of flavor in this wine, that aroma. Here again, do I notice the green pepper? Almost not at all. I mean, it really is. It's just become sort of combined with all the other aromas and flavors you're getting out of that wine. This wine has undoubtedly seen some oak. Oh yeah, it's got that perfume, just that beautiful vein of sweet aroma coming out of it. And again, not sugar, but just beautiful, juicy red fruits. With a nice, dark, almost bitter, not quite chocolate, but in the background. Oh, beautiful wine. Absolutely beautiful. And again, if you taste this wine, in many ways, good acidity, but certainly rounder, bigger. A little bit of orange rind. There's a little bitterness to that. Wonderful, though. Dark fruits. Certainly brambly, sort of blackberries. And this, again, I think a very good food wine, especially because it has that little bit of thing to it. So it would go with a lot of things that would be grilled. And certainly, you could certainly do this with steak. You could certainly do it with prime rib. You could certainly do this with pork. Any number of things where this would just shine. Oh, that's tasty. Wow. A little about this wine. Here it is, Domaine de Palu. That actually is one of the signs that are around there. I start to laugh, because in fact, I wrote them. In fact, and here when I went to the website, like the next day to the one place, they had gotten rid of those pictures because they had them. It's like, well, this isn't the place. Yeah, I was shocked when I went there. Because as I said, it wasn't very much. There's, of course, a beautiful picture on their website of Cabernet Franc grapes. Here it is coming in, and in fact, the vines. That's, in fact, I'm pretty sure they're vineyards. That is the lower part of the hill. And it's interesting, and these are things you have to realize. And he's done, Bertrand Sordes, who is now the owner. By the way, also owns and makes wine in Spain. In fact, owns several different places. In fact, is sort of cut his teeth in Spain before he came back to the family, and also has been to a number of other places. So really interesting along those lines in there. There's a picture I took, in fact, looking up the hill in there. In fact, the best places are, in fact, at the top of that hill. But what he told me was, after the war, when they planted a lot of these grapes, this area, in fact, I didn't put a picture in, this area is also known for apples. In fact, the Loire is the Jardin de France, the Garden of France. And so they have tons of fruits and all things. In fact, I passed some amazing orchards. I really wish I had more time because I wanted to explore the orchards. In fact, I have one picture, I didn't put it in here, where the trees were just loaded, and they were the spindle type, dwarf trees and all the things that I talk about when I taught horticulture. So it's just fascinating. But again, there's only so many hours. And so he didn't. But because of that, because the main tractors they had were for apples, which are wider than they really need for grapes. This is why, in fact, they have the spacing for the grapes that they have. And it's because of the mechanics that they had around there, the tractors, etc. So that was interesting. He, in fact, was very interesting. Here, in fact, is Monsieur Saudet, in fact, in part of the cellar, as you can see there. This is another picture of the cellar that I took while I was there. We tasted some wonderful wines. And you wonder why the flowers? Because pensée is also the word for violets in French. And thoughts, it's either thoughts or violets. In fact, they sort of share a word there. And so these are pensées de Palou. And so I had to, add a picture of the violets that were there in there. As you can see, the vines are from Cravant de la Coteau, very, very good. In the middle of the slope, sandy with rocks rich in iron. Biodynamic use again, 34 hectoliters thing. In other words, not very high. Fermentation, maceration in concrete wine tanks for 21 days using indigenous yeast. And it's interesting, they use the Spanish term, crianza. So 12 months in Burgundy barrels, then you're 6 months in concrete wine tanks. And so it does, in fact, typically, and I'm sure they're not new Burgundy barrels, but they do have some oak, in fact, from that, and that's, in fact, how the wine is made. The Spectator, by the way, gave this 92. You can see mulled spice, black tea, gently steeped cherries, blackberry fruits there, and wine, savory, chalky minerals. Parker gave it 91. Talking about it, pure, fresh, fragrant, which it is. Intense bouquet of ripened, concentrated, spicy red and dark berries, dairies, cassis cherries, earthy, mineral, floral aromas, silky texture, fresh and vital. Straight and tight, intense, elegant, juicy, fruit texture. Wonderful wine. Excellent, nervy, and stimulating. And 91 from Suckling. He says cracked pepper, bark, blackberries. Again, there's currant leaves, medium-bodied, vibrant acidity, fine tannins, fresh and papery. Drink or hold. And this wine, no problem. This wine would last another 5 years. Finally, the other place that I visited that, of course, is very high on my list, I saw this, I don't even know, I guess it was, it had to be in the 90s when I had gone there. And it was one of those places, Chenonceau, where you think, you said the thing where, you have a build-up and you've read about it and think, is it going to be as good as I think? Not a problem. This place is just beautiful. It's on the Cher River. This, in fact, you park and then you walk through these wonderful trees to get there. And so this is, in fact, what you see first as you are getting into there. The gardens. This place, again, has the most amazing history. It was basically built around 1535. It was actually given by King Francis I to his mistress, Diane de Poitiers, which, in fact, probably saved it 2 centuries later from the Reign of Terror and the French Revolution, because it was not crown land because of that. Though Diane, of course, owned it and, in fact, helped and made this big garden. Well, then when King Francis died, his wife, he had a wife, Catherine de Medici, she basically threw Diane out and, in fact, gave her the Chateau de Chaumont. Not so bad, but not as good as Diggs as Chenonceau. And then she, in fact, moved in. In fact, for a while, Chenonceau was the seat of the French government because she moved there with her son, who she was the regent for, and basically ruled France, in fact, from Chenonceau. So it's sort of really interesting how it was along those lines. Then actually it was her daughter, who was Louise of Lorraine. She married Henry III, and when he died, she basically lived there, and she basically turned it into, almost a nunnery. I mean, she did nothing but, in fact, sort of went into deep, deep, deep mourning over his death. And some of the rooms, in fact, you can see that way. I didn't add everything, in fact, to all of that. Also interesting, and let me show you a picture then too. This, in fact, as you can see, some of the gardens along the way. And this, of course, is looking across Catherine de Poitier's garden at Chenonceau. It goes over the Cher River. And originally, in fact, it was more of a bridge, but then they built this very large, I think that's a picture now coming there, of course, is Diane de Poitier's garden. This is, in fact, in Catherine de Medicis' garden, because she built one on the other side in there. And again, flowers that are there, and flowers. So anyway, I'll give you a little history before I get any further. This woman, Louise Dupin, she was one of the real amazing people of the Enlightenment. And so everyone who was anyone, Diderot, etc. In fact, her secretary was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the very famous philosopher. And in fact, she wrote, in fact, the Code of Women's Rights with Rousseau. So very much an early feminist, and partially because of her being a supporter of the Enlightenment and not of the aristocracy, etc. They did not, in fact, attack Chenonceau during the Reign of Terror. And so, in fact, it remained, in fact, intact with that. So very, very interesting. It went through a number of different hands. But what's interesting is, in 1913, these people, in fact, I want to make sure I say their name right, the Meuniers, who, in fact, make wonderful chocolate in France, they bought it. And they, in fact, still own it. And in World War I, they turned it into it was literally into a hospital. And he paid, in fact, for all of the care of all of the soldiers in the hospital that they turned this into. In World War II, it was the edge of what was completely German occupied and what was sort of in the Vichy government. And so they smuggled many, many people across the river through this, as you will see, through this room that goes from one side of the river to the other. So it's amazing. Then, when I was there, as I'm leaving, this poor guy, because I basically said to him, it's like, I basically almost like grabbed him and said, "Who does your flowers?" The flowers in the chateau are some of the most beautiful ones I've ever seen. Well, here I find out that the guy's an Instagram account. He, in fact, was, has been decorated all over the place. In fact, a very thriving business in one of the cities, and they lured him into doing this. And in fact, the candy makers still own the chateau, and she loves flowers, and so she comes and helps in the whole thing. And so this is why all the flowers are there. I mean, look at these things. And of course, wonderful little chapel. Look at these flowers. Oh my heavens, it was amazing. This is, in fact, this room, which in fact was added so that, Marie de Medici could hold court, etc. That's in fact a bridge. So you go out the door on the other side, and you are, in fact, across the river. I was able to do that one of the times I was there, but now they only do it a few months in the summer, so I could not get out the other door. I wanted this kitchen. In fact, I was traveling, of course, with my friend, and I said, could you make a disturbance so I can steal some of these pots? In fact, there's only one pot. I decided if I only did one, there was one pot up on the stove that I really, really wanted. It was just amazing to see. This is Diane de Poitiers. She, in fact, really interesting lives. In fact, just the things I found out, not even this time, but reading before, because she, in fact, basically sort of gave, sex talks to Marie de Medici to sort of liven up their marriage, even though she was, in fact, King Francis's mistress. Louis XIV, of course, spent that way. I really love this. It's really the frame. That amazing frame of that picture was, in fact, that's only 4 pieces of wood. They carved all of those out of 4 pieces of wood to make that frame around that painting of Louis XIV. Look at these flowers. And I've got many more pictures. I'm doing a thing on the flowers for the garden club, and I have so many pictures. It's just an amazing place to visit. Just Absolutely wonderful. This is looking across that Marie de Medicis garden. Again, pictures. In fact, I took it from inside the building. And that's one thing. And we're getting to the point where we should. These are cyclamen, and you probably know the flora cyclamen, but there are wild types, and in fact, they can live in the woods. And I've decided that I want some. But this is, in fact, a close-up to show you. And there, of course, the cyclamen, in fact, in the fall, just lining, in fact, this beautiful woodland. So, and this, of course, is as you go back. This is looking back at Chenonceau in there. So it was really, really great to see. Any questions, Emily?
I think we have time. We have time for one because we are starting to run out of time. So are there any vineyards in mid to South France investing in property in northern France or other countries due to climate change?
Good question. And I don't know of anyone specifically looking that way. Interestingly enough, in fact, I was just looking at the best wine books of 2023. And in fact, a very interesting thing, and a good example of that is, well, I could sort of give you an idea. England, 40 years ago, you didn't grow decent grapes in England. It was too cold. But now, in fact, you do have, in fact, some of the French champagne houses, because, in fact, England's making very, very, very good sparkling wines now. And so these are some of the changes. You're going to see, one of the pictures I show in class is, in fact, a vineyard that's on a fjord in Norway. And so I don't know if there's a real concerted effort to try to find new places to the north, but it certainly does make sense, in fact, to think about doing so. I have a few more pictures of them, so I've run through. This is, in fact, the place that I stayed, which was absolutely amazing in Amboise, because, in fact, we had these places in there. This is, in fact, the door, how you got into the place. And by the way, obviously, I drank wine. The food was amazing. We had some of the best meals you could possibly. It was just so much fun to go. And in many cases, it was, in fact, sort of pre-feed. I mean, you basically walked in and they served you food. They asked you, in fact, in one place, do you have any food allergies or anything you absolutely do not like? And then they just brought you food and you ate it and you were happy to do so. And it was sort of amazing how beautiful, in fact, some of the food was, and how, I mean, look at that, the leaf and the things that they did. It was really, and not horrendously expensive. So it's really great. And this is only a small portion of the wines I had. And by the way, you would be glad, especially when it comes to time, I didn't show you. I also went to the Chateau de Fontainebleau, and it is absolutely unbelievable building. And all I could think of as I went through is the millions of man hours of work to make a place that is absolutely so amazing. It's about 50 minutes, maybe about 40 miles outside of Paris. Anything else, Emily?
Nope.
All I heard was a pop.
Oh, nope.
Okay, well then, happy holidays from Miami University Alumni Association, and especially from me. Thank you for joining this evening.
And thank you, Jack. And if we didn't get to your question, I apologize. We had a couple, but we are getting close on time. So thank you once again for joining us, and a big thank you to you, Jack, for your time tonight. Thank you to all of you that tuned in and asked questions. I hope you had a great time and learned something new. I invite you to check out all of our other Alumni Association webinars. I believe we have a couple next week. You can find that at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Those are free and open to all. So with that being said, have a great weekend and love and honor.